Welcome to the Guelph Real Estate Report podcast with your host and Guelph Realtor, Ryan Waller. This podcast is designed to provide information for those buying and selling homes in the Guelph area to make the process more informative, fun, and a little less stressful. Now, on with the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Guelph Real Estate Report podcast. This is episode number 37. My name is Ryan Waller, and I work in Guelph Real Estate with my lovely wife, Beth. April is done, and April is the first of the big three. April, May, and June make up over half the sales in the Guelph real estate market on an annual basis. So this is an important time in the real estate market here, which can make or break a full year just because it is so heavily weighted in these 3 months. So we're going to look at how April performed, where that puts us on a year-to-date basis, and some interesting, well, hopefully you find them interesting facts about the Guelph real estate market and some of the things that we're watching out for. But first, just a thank you to everyone who has tuned in the past and still tuning in. We have just passed the 1,000 download mark, and who knew that people would be interested in a Guelph real estate podcast? I don't know who a lot of the listeners are. I know who some of them are, and we just appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to listen to this. This is the only Guelph real estate podcast that's ongoing, that as far as I know anyways, and the goal is to help people become more informed on the market and give unbiased information. So reaching into the real estate podcast mailbag, we have Brett, who sent us a message saying that at some point in the 8-minute mark of our last episode, music started blaring out, and I don't know how that happened, but I'll try not to let it happen again. Krista, who sent us a message on Instagram saying she's a new listener and appreciates the honest take, which we appreciate that feedback. And to Andrew and Larissa, who are currently overseas and moving to the Royal City. Happy to work with you. And everyone else who may be out there. Anybody who needs help or insights, who have questions, always feel free to get in touch. Now into April, we had 139 sales, of which 96 of them were in the detached segment, and the remaining 43 were in the condo and townhouse segment. Overall, we had 4.6 sales per day. That is below the last 5 years. The last 5 years range from 4.9 all the way up to 7.1. So we rolled in slightly below at 4.6. The only April that was slower was, of course, April of 2020, our first full month of COVID where nobody was doing anything. We are definitely above that number. We were saved a bit by the last week of April, mainly between the 22nd and 30th. The month was pretty sluggish. It was a bit concerning when I was watching the numbers roll in, but the trend certainly changed at the end of the month and brought us up to that 4.6. And it became really a regular April at that point, but it didn't happen until the very end. The overall average price in April was $746,000, and that was made up of the sales in detached, as mentioned, 96 at $849,000, and the condo and townhouse segment, 43 sales, averaged $516,000. So those two together, overall average $746,000, which puts us in a mid-range. We've ranged anywhere from low 700s up to 800, so we're right in the middle of the range. And so with April in, we can take a look at our year-to-date numbers. So from January 1st until April 30th of 2026 versus the same period last year, the number of homes sold is down 12%. That is 65 less houses have sold in 2026. The dollar volume, so if you add up all of the sale prices of homes this year versus last, is down 17%. That's $328 million in sales this year versus $397 last year. And the last metric is the average price. And average price is interesting because despite the fact that the number of homes sold and the dollar volume sold is down, double digits, the average price has only declined 5%, 744,000 so far this year versus 785 last year. So we are down in all the metrics. I think that in April, May, and June, we're going to pick up a little bit of that. And we'll talk a little bit about how May is rolling up so far into the first week. But it is, I suspect, going to be more of this for the next little while. More of close to last year, but not quite at last year type numbers. Okay, so let's break down what we had that sold in April, give you a little more detail into the two segments. The two segments we always talk about are detached homes, semi-detached, although there aren't many fall into this. So this is the freehold category. And in this segment, we had 96 sales, as mentioned. 515,000 was the low. That was in Exhibition Park. And in fact, there were actually a couple that sold in the 500s in Exhibition Park in April. And the high was 1.35 million in Old University. And Old University, at this price point, seems to have a number of homes that are selling in this range too. So on both ends of the spectrum, there seems to be some demand for similar type homes. As mentioned earlier, the overall average 849,000. It's the midpoint of what we've been seeing over the last year. Homes sold at an average of 98% of their last listed asking price, and that's really nothing surprising. It means there's a little bit of wiggle room, less than if you were buying a condo, but there is still a little wiggle room. 12 of the 96 sold over the asking price. 8 sold at the asking price. So between those two, that makes up 1/5 of the total sales, 20%. And the remaining sales that happened in detached, 80% of them sold under the asking price. Is now a good time to sell? We get this question all the time. If you have a detached house and you are selling one of these two things, I think we have demand for. If you are selling a detached home between, I'd say, 900,000 and 1.2 million in downtown Guelph or any of the immediate downtown surrounding neighborhoods. So that would be Exhibition Park, St. George's Park, the Ward, and Old University. There is definitely demand for those. Just because there have been so few that when they come out, buyers all flock to them. And sometimes buyers are fearful that they won't get a chance for another while to buy another one, so they are willing to be a little more aggressive. So if you have one of those, it is a great time to sell. Again, we always talk about bungalows, specifically the post-war bungalows that you can find probably about a kilometer or two out of the downtown core, built in the mid-50s to early 60s. These are always in demand because they have such a large buyer pool. First-time buyers, downsizers, investors, everybody likes them. So that's why they tend to go quickly when they come up. So if you have that segment, or you have a house in around downtown between 900 and 1.2, you should consider selling. If you're thinking now or some other time later this year, now is a great time. I'm not sure if it'll get better or worse later, but in the moment, it is a great time. We have about 3 months inventory sitting in the detached segment, puts us in about a balanced market. This is the more stable of the two segments. It is less volatile in price. And as we get slow declines in price, these become more attractive because there are still many condos that are now starting to bleed into the lower end detached. So if you have a $600,000 condo, the likelihood of you finding a $600,000 detached house right now is starting to happen. And so many people, when given the choice, they would rather have the detached house and no condo fees than a condo at the same price with fees. It's not right or wrong. It's just the preference of the general public when two things come together at the same price. If we look to the condo segment, we have seen a bit of life here. And the condo segment for the longest time was selling just under or at 1 unit per day. And the condo segment is anything with a fee. So that is a condo apartment, a condo townhouse, regular townhouses, stacked townhouses, anything that has a monthly fee in a condo corporation. There were 43 that sold in April, which puts us over one per day, and it's a bit of life that we've seen too. 255,000 was the low price. That was a low-rise building in Dovercliff. I think it was on Conroy. And 1,017,000 was the high. That was a condo downtown Guelph. Overall average here, 519,000. This is trending towards the low end of what we've seen over the past year. We've seen anywhere between 500 to 600,000. So at 519, we're trending towards the lower end, but it has stabilized here. We saw this the last update we did a few weeks ago. Homes here sold an average of 98%. Again, there is still some negotiation that happens. 24% of the condos that sold in the past month sold at or above the asking price. And the remaining 76% or 33 sold under the asking price. So it does appear there's a bit of life coming here. I'm not sure whether it's seasonality or whether it's buyer demand. Maybe buyers are seeing that prices are getting to the point where they're becoming really attractive, or sellers are starting to react to market pricing and bringing them down to a level where a transaction is happening. Is it a good time to buy a condo in town? Well, I think it's going to get better. If you are considering buying a condo, I would wait for a little bit longer, simply because we believe this segment has a little further to fall before it becomes attractive. And I think in May and June, we're going to see a lot of inventory. Those are the highest volume inventory months. And I don't think that we're going to see the corresponding number of buyers coming out. So we're going to build inventory, I think, over the next few months. The summer months are always a little sluggish. And so I think we may see a little bit of life in the condo market into September. But I think between now and September, if you were thinking of buying, you might just want to hold out for another month or two. Maybe start looking now, but check out your options. You might want to wait a little bit longer to pull the trigger. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but the last thing I want to touch on is what type of market we're in. You can be under 2 months and be a seller's market, and between 2 to 4 months inventory, you have a balanced market, and 6+ months of inventory is a buyer's market. The full calculation of how I get there is on the blog version of this. I won't bore you with those details, but in summary, we are sitting at 4.1 months of inventory, which puts us dead in the middle of a buyer and seller market, which means typical negotiations are happening. In fact, from many people's perspective, we're in an ideal state. We're right in the very middle. Lots of room to negotiate on both sides, and typical market conditions exist. I do think as we see a rise in inventory in May and June, which we always do, I think we're going to see less buyers in July and August, which means the inventory will stick around and we will get some more inventory from July and August listings. I think that we are going to move closer to a buyer's market by the end of summer. I initially thought it was going to happen now. I've moved that, I think, until maybe July or August. That's not everything. That's not every type of property out there. But I do think we're going to have a glut of inventory come the fall. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about 3 things that you should be doing right now if you're buying a house, and 3 things you should be doing right now if you are selling a house. And this is, of course, a Guelph podcast, but it would apply to the outlying markets and many other markets as well, based on the type of market we're in the moment. And if we can help you make some better decisions, we would be happy to do that. So tune into the next episode. Talk to you soon.